What's poppin', Acolytes? It's me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. Heavy spoilers coming your way for the first two episodes of the new Star Wars Disney Plus show, The Acolyte, a super intriguing Star Wars mystery set a long time ago in the Star Wars galaxy during the bright, idealistic days of the High Republic. So without further ado, let's just get into it, gang. The Acolyte starts off with blue text over the image of outer space, telling us that this show is set 100 years before the rise of Palpatine's empire, with this time period being known as the era of the High Republic, and it's an era that has enjoyed centuries of war-free bliss as the Jedi and all the best explorers of the Republic begin to expand outward and discover the new worlds of the outer rim of the galaxy. However, it is an era that lasts only 400 years, from around 500 BBY to 100 BBY, with the term BBY of course standing for Big Booty Yams. I'm talking to you, Mega the Stallion, goddamn. I'm just kidding, it means before the Battle of Yavin that occurred in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. So, if the Acolyte takes place 100 years before the Empire, like this intro says, then this show takes place during the very end of the High Republic era, an end that we could actually see occur sometime during the series. And the text continues by noting that, in the dark corners of the galaxy, a powerful few learn to use the Force in secret, with Amanda Stenberg's May being one of those non-Jedi Force users. And what's an Acolyte show without some light alcohol, if you know what I mean? Being so, this series starts off with a pissed off May and Asaya arriving on the planet Ueda to visit a local bar there, and with a little monetary persuasion, May is pointed in the right direction by a tiny local masked alien child. And throughout these first two episodes of the series, we'll see May routinely pay young kids on the street money in order for them to point her in the right direction or just help her with a task, a pattern that I believe is reflective of May's compassion for the poor of the galaxy, which could possibly be something that she could personally relate to with her own upbringing as a child. Entering this bar, May immediately confronts Jedi Master Indara, played by the legendary Carrie Ann Moss, who famously played the character Trinity in the Matrix films. May claims that the two of them have unfinished business, and challenges Indara to attack her with all of her strength in a fight to the death. Master Indara initially dismisses May, saying that the Jedi do not attack the unarmed, with May immediately refuting that, saying, yeah bitch, you do. That's what you guys do. You did it to me, bish, before attacking some of the alien homies that Master Indara was eating with in order to push the Jedi into aggressive action. However, when May is attacking these bar patrons, she makes sure to not actually kill any of them, even though she had many opportunities to, like when she literally had one of them by the neck. And I straight up thought that she was going to snap that man's neck in two, but she didn't, which I found very interesting. And even though May was of course very intent on killing Master Indara and a select few other Jedi for a mysterious wrongdoing of the past, May's fighting style immediately shows us that she herself doesn't seem to 100% follow the extremely ruthless and deadly battle tendencies that dark force cults like the Sith use. Because a Sith or a follower of Sith teachings would have no problem with slicing and dicing every single patron at that bar before using the Force to choke the lives out of that bar owner and his kid just to make sure there weren't any witnesses. But May appears to have learned her skills in the Force through a slightly more balanced Force cult outside of the Jedi Order, a Force cult likely belonging to that of the character Mother Anastasia, who we have seen in the promo material for The Acolyte being played by actress Jodie Turner-Smith. According to the StarWars.com databank, Mother Anastasia leads a mysterious coven of Force-attuned witches that are based out on a planet called Brendok, which is really interesting to see considering that the most prevalent witches in the Star Wars mythos up until this point were the Night Sisters of Dathomir, who recently appeared for the first time in live action in the Ahsoka TV series as the main antagonists of that show. And we don't know much about Mother Anastasia as of these first two episodes, but we do know that her and May Anastasia share the same last name, implying that Mother Anastasia is one of May and Osha Anastasia's two mothers. This likely being the case, May's appearance in this show closely resembles that of Mother Anastasia's, in particular with their shared hooded purple robes, hairstyles, and similar tattoos on their heads. Tattoos purposely modeled after the yin-yang symbol of balance. And though not expressly said, these tattoos appear to be exclusive to those who followed or once followed Anastasia's coven. The yin-yang symbol is a super important piece of symbolism for the Star Wars universe in general because it is usually meant to symbolize the interconnected nature of light and darkness within the Star Wars cosmos, as well as within every living being within that cosmos. And we actually see that reflected in the names of the twins of this series, May and Osha. May's name literally means bitter in English, denoting her as the darker, angrier twin, while Osha's name means shining in Indian Sanskrit, pointing to Osha's affinity towards the Jedi and the lighter side of the Force. However, just like the yin-yang symbol displays, there is always a little bit of light in the darkness and darkness in the light, and this is very much reflected in both May and Osha's personalities. While May appears to be working for that mysterious dark side Force user with a red lightsaber who seems very much intent on the murder of the Jedi, May herself has goodness and compassion within her, as we can see when May chooses to spare that barkeeper and his child, despite knowing that they've seen her face and could easily identify her. And it's also reflected in her routinely paying children in order to help her versus, paying adults, because that to me shows May's light-sided compassion. Like, that is the light within the darkness half of the yin-yang dynamic, while the light side affiliated Osha struggles with her inner darkness, namely her inability to let go and stop mourning her past, combined with her anger at May for somehow being responsible for the fire that killed their two mothers. Like, duality is the main theme of this series, and it's a theme expertly reflected within the logo of the Acolyte series itself, as the O in the Acolyte seems purposely modeled after a solar eclipse, with the solar eclipse representing both darkness and light, and with the O splitting into two O's that glow with a Jedi blue as well as a dark-sidey orangey red, representing both Osha and May. Two twins, two mothers, two sides of the Force. Duality is everywhere in the Acolyte, man. But anyways, in one of the Acolyte trailers, Mother Anastasia tells a young May that destiny is not decided for you by an anonymous force. If you want to pull the thread and change everything, then pull it. And in another trailer, she seems to hint that the overall conflict at the heart of the Acolyte series isn't about good or bad, but it's about power and who's allowed to use that power. These two quotes seem to imply that Mother Anastasia's cult of Force users seem to have a far more lax and independent take on the nature of the Force than the Jedi do, and that the Jedi themselves may actually be a cult that could be radically policing who gets to practice using the Force throughout the galaxy, likely by systematically hunting down cults that they fear might end up becoming a danger to the galaxy in the future. And I have a feeling here that this could be exactly what is at the heart of May's vendetta against Master Indara in this bar, as it seems that the Jedi could have possibly ordered Master Indara, as well as a few other Jedi, to eliminate Mother Anastasia for what the Jedi cult arrogantly perceived as the greater good for the overall health of the Force in the galaxy. But anyways, back to that bar fight, Master Indara grabs May's hand in order to keep her from hurting anyone else, which leads Indara to defending herself from more of May's attacks, while May keeps trying to reach for Master Indara's lightsaber, a gesture that I believe to be a dark side manipulation tactic that May is trying to use on Master Indara, specifically to get Indara to grab her lightsaber and ignite it out of fear and anger at her enemy. And I think this has to do with what we hear that mysterious masked dark side user say at the very end of episode 1 when they say that the Jedi live in a dream they believe everyone shares. If you attack a Jedi with a weapon, you will fail. Steel or laser are no threat to them. But an Acolyte kills without a weapon. An Acolyte kills the dream. Now, the Jedi of the High Republic actually have this motto that they love to shout to hype themselves up, and that motto is, "For light and life." The Jedi's main dream and mission is to preserve light and life throughout the galaxy, not only by becoming peacekeepers throughout the galaxy, but also by keeping those who would use the dark side of the Force from gaining too much influence and breeding galactic chaos. By becoming living beacons of hope for the galaxy, the Jedi have basically erected themselves as the #1 true Force cult that is the only cult in the galaxy noble and righteous enough to tap into the will of the Force, giving them some cosmic divine authority to dictate the fate of the galaxy their way. Real arrogant shit. To me, this masked dark side user is using May as their acolyte in order to get the Jedi to be plagued by fear, By ordering May to execute Jedi without a weapon, I feel like May's Dark Master wants the Jedi to start clinging to their lightsabers in fear of the growing power of the dark side, and to become so fearful that they start raising their weapons at unarmed opponents, which is something expressly forbidden by the Jedi Code. Because once Jedi start using their lightsabers to strike out in fear, they stop embodying the image of the perfect, life-protecting, peacekeeping religion in the universe, and start being exposed for being a religion of flawed and fearful beings, just like the rest of the other Force cults growing in the galaxy. If the Jedi start reacting out of fear, then it's only a matter of time for the Jedi to fall, and that's that seed that I believe this Dark Master is trying to plant with May, the seed of doubt in the Jedi Order of the High Republic, because it is historical seeds like that that could have very well inspired Anakin Skywalker's eventual turn to the dark side when he himself began to see the Jedi becoming hypocrites as soon as the fear of the Phantom Menace began to cloud their adherence to their own peacekeeping ideologies in favor of becoming soldiers and spies. When Indara asks May who trained her, that seemed very indicative of just how much influence the Jedi have in the galaxy as pretty much its solitary source for education in the Force, as I believe Indara could have asked this in order to alert the Jedi of a possible other Force religion that could need immediate monitoring and or silencing. And as Indara's fight with May progressed, Indara would use the Force to grab one of May's knives. And for a split second there, you could actually see that Indara's fear of May's power has caused Indara to raise May's knife at what appeared to be an unarmed May, a clear violation of the Jedi Code. When Indara realizes this, she drops the knife, but would immediately need to ignite her lightsaber when May pressures her even more with some knife attacks, with May reminding Indara that Jedi aren't supposed to ignite their lightsaber unless they are ready to kill, which Indara was about to do out of fear. The Jedi were trained to only use the Force and their lightsaber in defense of light and life, not as a tool to kill out of fear. Like, the lightsabers are supposed to be used as shields, not as swords. And because of that reminder, Indara rejects her dark-sided fear and puts her lightsaber down. However, that was pretty much the beginning of the end for Indara, as May would capitalize on Indara's goody-two-shoes guardian nature by threatening the life of the barkeeper, in order to force Indara to use the Force to stop the knife and become vulnerable for a killing blow. This whole fight to me seemed purposely designed to expose the hypocrisy of the Jedi while simultaneously using their own beloved code against them to lead to their own demise, which is exactly what happened to the Jedi during the prequel trilogy 100 years later. But before Indara fell, it was clear that Indara realized why May was here to kill her as soon as she identified who was underneath that mask. And I feel like Indara felt just as guilty as that meditating Jedi that we meet in episode 2 that willingly drank that poison in search for absolution for his past sins. Sins that definitely feel tied to that big fire that claimed the lives of May's loved ones. But anyways, after this we are introduced to May's sister Osha and her trusty repair droid Pip, as May serves as a mechanic aboard a Trade Federation cargo ship, with the Nemoidian alien race of course being in charge of this trade ship, just like they were in the prequel trilogy. However, instead of using astromechs like R2-D2 and whatnot, this Trade Federation ship has instead employed real human workers to conduct their repairs. When talking to her fellow mechanic colleague as a power droid walks past, her colleague mentions to Osha that she missed a dope night of chill times on the planet Nar Shaddaa, a moon that orbits the Hutt homeworld of Nal Hutta. Because of its Hutt influence, the moon has become a haven for mercenaries, pirates, and all sorts of scum and villainy trying to do some illegal shit to make a dollar. And because of that, Nar Shaddaa is also known as the Smuggler's Moon. But anyways, when Osha is sent to repair the shields on the ship, a fire breaks out. A fire that triggers Osha's past trauma of the fire that claimed her family, with audio of that night playing in the background that has what sounds like a young Osha screaming, "Mama, help me, no!" But after Osha snaps out of her relived trauma, she puts out that inexplicable fire existing in the vacuum of space and immediately spots a Jedi Vector starfighter approaching the Trade Federation cargo ship, with Jedi Knight Yord Fandar and his Padawan Tassiloa coming aboard specifically looking for Osha herself. Before Yord could forcefully get the information he needed with a Jedi mind trick, one of the Neimoidians quickly tells Yord where Osha is staying at on their ship. When Osha finds her old pal Yord stick up his ass in her living quarters, she discovers that Yord had become a Jedi Knight only 2 years prior to this reunion, with Osha being genuinely proud of her former Padawan comrade. Yord has also become a Jedi Temple Guardian, as evidenced by Yord's yellow glowing lightsaber, which is the color that all Guardians of the Jedi Temple will still be rocking during the era of the Clone Wars 100 years later, and the same color lightsaber that Rey would end up getting at the end of Rise of Skywalker, likely to symbolize Rey being the symbolic guardian of the Jedi Order as the embodiment of all of the Jedi. Your boy Yord is a hardcore follower of the teachings of the Jedi, and because of that and his role as a Temple Guardian, it seems that Yord has developed a great fear of the dark side, which is why he quickly reaches for his lightsaber when someone he suspects as a Jedi killer merely goes to fidget with her droid. Like, as soon as I saw Yord reach for his lightsaber in that moment, I was like, oh god, this boy is so confident in the purity of his Jedi training that he is perfectly unaware of his own dark side growing within him. Because much like Yoda says in the Star Wars prequel trilogy, fear is the path to the dark side. And while yes, we know that fear is perfectly fine to have, fear becomes super dangerous when you have no idea that you're being controlled by it, which was one of the biggest flaws of the Jedi Order, and it's a flaw that seems to be very alive with Yord. But don't worry, Yord, you're only a symptom to a greater problem with the Jedi. Don't even worry about it. Just keep being a self-righteous space cop with Killmonger-ass hair. Why does every black character have Killmonger-ass hair these days? This hairstyle needs to die already. But anyways, during this conversation, we learned that Osha joined the Jedi Order at the age of 8 after being recruited by Jedi Master Soul, a Jedi that we quickly learn has a deep emotional attachment to his former Padawan, an attachment that Master Soul's newest Padawan, Jeki Lon, questions him about when we first meet her later on, with the half-human, half-feline Jeki, of course, being played by Daphne Keane, who famously played Lara, aka X-23, alongside Hugh Jackman's Wolverine in Logan. In the trailers for The Acolyte, we can see a young Soul meeting a younger Osha for the first time on Mother Anasaya's planet of Brendok. And we would learn later during Saul's conversation with the Green Mirialan Jedi Master Vernestra Rwoh that both Saul and Master Indara would save Osha from that fire on Brendok before she was brought to the Jedi Order. During Yord and Tassi's interrogation of Osha, Tassi mentions that when an 8-year-old Osha was brought to the Jedi Order, they were hesitant to bring her in because Osha was so old, and because she was deeply mourning the loss of her family from that fire, which of course mirrors what happened to the 9-year-old Anakin Skywalker in The Phantom Menace when Qui-Gon Jinn brought him before the Jedi to be trained after he was separated from his mother. Because the Jedi are sort of kinda creepy, the Jedi usually prefer to recruit children around like 1 to 6-ish years old, with like 7 and 8-year-olds very much pushing the boundaries for the ages they felt comfortable to teach. Mostly because they figured that the older one is without having been indoctrinated in the Jedi Code, the more likely one's attachments are going to get in the way of their training. So much like the future Jedi of the prequel trilogy found the 9-year-old Anakin Skywalker's sadness over being separated from his mother to be a problem, the Jedi of this era saw Osha's sadness over the loss of her 2 mothers and sisters to be a potential problem as well as a potential road to the dark side later on. However, the Council would ultimately choose to take a risk on Osha and let her train as one of Master Soul's Padawans. However, apparently there did come a time when Jedi Master Indara would recommend that Osha's training be discontinued for some mysterious reason. However, it would be Osha herself that would make the choice to leave the Jedi Order for good in order to make her way around the galaxy as a mechanic. Unfortunately for Osha, the bar owner from Ueda would accidentally identify her as the destroyer of his bar, forcing Yord to handcuff Osha and place her on a droid-operated transport ship to Coruscant, the home of the Jedi Grand Temple, a temple that my boy Paul noticed was slightly elevated from the surface of Coruscant in this era, as in the future it seems that the surface of Coruscant seems to have extended to connect to the base of the Grand Temple. Having this religious temple slightly elevated over the crime-ridden lower levels of Coruscant, this Grand Temple of the High Republic era kind of visually shows just how high, mighty, and superior the Jedi Council saw themselves in comparison to the rest of the planet they live on. When we enter the Jedi Temple on Coruscant for the first time in this show, we are introduced to Jedi Master Soul, played by Squid Game actor Lee Jung-jae. Like we saw in the trailers, Master Saul is training a group of young Jedi younglings to meditate on the very nature of the Force and to share how the Force manifests for them in their mind, with a hairy child member of the Tar Sunt race meditating among them. During this lesson, Saul tells his Padawans to not trust their eyes, but to rely on the Force to guide them, with things that you see not being what they seem being the overall theme of this multi-layered murder mystery of a Star Wars TV show. Saul encourages his students to connect to the Force and to view the Force like a vast ocean that they should surrender to, before asking his students what appears in their minds. One student says they see balance, which is of course the overall goal of the Jedi, and the main focus of the Mortis god entity known as the Father. Another student says that they see life, which is what the Jedi seek to protect above all else, and is the main focus of the light side Mortis goddess known as the Daughter. While a third student mentions that she sees fire, which is indicative of death and destruction, the tenets embodied by the dark side Mortis god known as the Sun. These three entities were of course recently featured as statues at the very end of Season 1 of Ahsoka after making their debut in the Clone Wars animated series and making cameos in Star Wars Rebels as well. Saul then compares the power of the Force to both orange fire and the blue ocean, two opposing elements like the dark and light sides that they represent, and with the O in the Acolyte logo being an orange and blue shining eclipse, using fire and the ocean as examples for the Force in this duality-centric narrative feels deeply intentional here. When the students are dismissed for lunch, we are then introduced to the live-action version of Jedi Master Vernestra Rwoh for the very first time, as played by actress Rebecca Henderson, a Jedi who actually made their first appearance as a teenager within the pages of the book The High Republic: A Test of Courage that was released in July 2021. It is also in that book that we are introduced to Vernestra's crazy unique lightsaber known as a light whip, which allows Vernestra to alter her lightsaber's beam into a whip, something that I am super excited to see in action later on in the season. And apparently the creators of the show have teased that this is not the only unique lightsaber that we will be seeing over the course of this show. But anyways, with that Test of Courage book taking place in the year 232 BBY, when Vernestra was 16 years old, it means that Vernestra was born around 248 BBY, making her around 148 years old during the events of this Acolyte series. And good lord, does she look pretty damn good for her age. I mean, yeah, she did lose her fancy purplish black hair over the course of those years and went fully bald, but hey, it's the High Republic era and bald is beautiful, baby. But anyways, Vernestra informs Saul that Osha is suspected of being Master Indara's murderer, something that Saul just could not believe. Vernestra then quickly notes Saul's attachment to his former Padawan, which is sort of unbecoming of a Jedi of Saul's stature. Then Vernestra reveals that she has fear of this Acolyte's actions, because if word were to reach the Jedi's political enemies, those enemies would likely try to use that to try to diminish the political influence of the Jedi, something that Vernestra seems very adamantly against, which could be another reason why this Dark Master of the Dark Side is using his Acolyte as his secret weapon to destroy the Jedi. And to be perfectly honest here, I don't trust this green bald-headed lady whatsoever. I mean, she seems way too ready to name Osha the killer of this series and to get the Jedi to get this matter resolved under the table with their own swift brand of righteous justice, just so that this Acolyte doesn't ruin the Jedi's political aspirations, which is super hypocritical because the Jedi aren't necessarily the judge, jury, and executioners of the Republic. Like, there are still laws that need to be followed. And much like we see in the prequel series, the Jedi are using their fear as an excuse to do whatever the hell they want and bend the rules of the Jedi Code. Like, I truly would not be surprised if Vernestra was the orchestrator behind Osha and May's fiery trauma, with Vernestra likely justifying such a ruthless action as being a necessary evil in order to get rid of Mother Anasaya's cult. But only time will tell there. But unfortunately for Osha, her transport to Coruscant is hijacked by the rest of the prisoners on board, with Osha being left behind for dead after she selflessly freed one of the prisoners from the mind control of a creature called a Dabuk. Crash landing on the planet Karlak, Osha then has a very peculiar Force vision of her and her sister May. After this vision brings Osha back in time to the center of her fiery loss on the planet Brendok, a vision of the younger May begins to recite a poem about the connection she shares with her sister Osha. May says, "You're with me and I'm with you, always one but born as two. As above sits the stars and below lies the sea, I give you you and you give you me. We are family, all my brothers and my sisters and me." End quote. I think this poem is extremely important to the story of the Acolyte because I have a feeling that it's teasing that Osha and May are part of a Force dyad, which is an unbreakable connection that two separate beings share through the Force that strongly link their minds together across time and space. And not only this, but a Force dyad also gifts the duo of a dyad immense power in the Force, as well as the power to manipulate life itself. When Palpatine discovered that both Ben Solo and Rey somehow formed a dyad in the Force, he siphoned their combined Force dyad power in order to restore his withering and dying, broken, old, clone-ass body, after remarking that a Force dyad as strong as theirs had not been seen for generations. With this vision in the Acolyte, I think there's a strong possibility here that May and Osha could be that very Force dyad that was last seen generations ago before the events of the Rise of Skywalker, but only time will tell on that as well. But then after Saul collects his Padawan Jeki as well as the rule-following Yord, they all hit light speed to intercept Osha on the planet Karlak. On the way there, Saul reveals that the fire on the planet Brendok happened 16 years prior when Saul was stationed on the planet. Saul then claims that the fire was started by May, and she was the one that killed Osha's entire family, with Osha being the sole survivor. However, with the theme of the show being things not being as they seem, it feels like Saul's memory of that event may not be completely accurate or complete, as there seems to be a deeper mystery afoot with that fire, as evidenced by the second episode. The Jedi then eventually catch Osha on Karlak before literally catching her from falling off of a cliff. Osha insists that she has nothing to do with the murders, a plea that her old master Saul is inclined to believe. And like I mentioned earlier, the episode ends with us seeing May approach the mysterious masked darkside user with that red lightsaber, a darkside user that seems to be implied to be a Sith, but could literally be any darkside user that has chosen to bleed out a kyber crystal and force their will upon that kyber crystal. And honestly, because of this show's strong duality theme, I have a feeling that this Dark Master could actually end up being one of May and Osha's mothers instead. A mother that survived the fires on Brendok just like her daughters did, possibly recruiting her own daughter May as her dark-sided acolyte in order to get revenge on the Jedi for what they did to Mother Anastasia and her cult. From what we've seen of this mysterious Force user in trailers, they seem to have a leaner, slender build, one that would fit a biological woman, a woman that could potentially be using a voice changer in order to sound like a deep-voiced, intimidating man. However, just because this masked person has a leaner build doesn't mean they're automatically a woman, because there's also a possibility here that May's Dark Master is none other than Chimere himself, played by Manny Jacinto from The Good Place. After May fails to break through Jedi Master Torbin's impenetrable Force barrier that he has perfected after years of communing with the Force at a Jedi temple on the planet Olega, May heads to the local apothecary on Olega, where her ally Chimere has taken up shop after getting rid of the previous owner of that apothecary shop. After May brings up Torbin's nearly perfect defense, Chimere wisely notes to her that everyone has a weakness, while preparing a poison called Bunta that would prove to exploit Master Torbin's greatest weakness, his need for forgiveness and to be absolved of his past sins. Sins that he apparently committed on May's homeworld of Brendok, the planet that very same poison was made and used as a hunting poison. But throughout that entire conversation between May and Chimere, I couldn't help but think that this guy knows a lot more than he lets on. And since we do learn later on that not even May knows the true identity of her new master, Chimere could very well be playing the role of May's lazy, alcoholic poison dealer of a dark-sided colleague when he's actually secretly the true master monitoring his student like some sort of undercover boss. And if Chimere is somehow indeed this Dark Lord in disguise, the time period that the Acolyte is set in does leave the door open for Chimere to potentially be Palpatine's former master, Darth Plagueis the Wise, as Palpatine would be born around 16 years after the events of this series. And yes, before you guys mention it, I do know that Darth Plagueis from Legends is actually part of the alien moon species. But since that version of Darth Plagueis is no longer canon, Darth Plagueis could literally be any race in the Star Wars universe. Chimere eventually being revealed as Darth Plagueis would make sense considering that he was introduced as a man with dark-sided wisdom who is adept at crafting deadly potions that can make people sick and die, much like a plague does. So that would make Chimere a wise, plague-making scientist of sorts, potentially earning him the title of Darth Plagueis the Wise. But that's just a wild theory based on what little we know about the character so far. And also keep in mind that Chimere does seem to love sleeping a whole lot and seems to be a pretty heavy sleeper, which is significant because when Palpatine tells Anakin about the demise of Darth Plagueis, he notes that Darth Plagueis was killed in his sleep by his apprentice, who we all know was Sheev Palpatine. So maybe including Chimere's affinity for sleep was a nod towards his eventual demise. But again, that's just a wild theory. But anyways, during their conversation, Chimere notes that if May thought a sleeping monk was tough, a Wookiee Jedi is going to be even harder to kill, teasing the coming of the Wookiee Jedi Kalnaka, who would appear at the very end of the episode after defending his home from some potential thieves, with Kalnaka being played by actor Joonas Suotamo, who previously played a younger Chewbacca in Solo: A Star Wars Story, the Star Wars movie that you forgot that you watched. And while Kalnaka will go down in Star Wars history as the first ever Wookiee Jedi in live action, there have been other Wookiee Jedi in Star Wars canon before, with the most well known being the Wookiee Gungi, who made his first appearance in the 5th season and 6th episode of the Clone Wars animated series. There were also 2 other Wookiee Jedi that served during the time of the High Republic, including a Wookiee named Arkoff, who made his first appearance in the first volume of the High Republic The Edge of Balance manga, as well as the Wookiee Padawan Buryaga Agaberry, who first appeared in the short story The High Republic Starlight that was included in Star Wars Insider Magazine issue 199. Anyways, after picking Osha up from the planet Karlak, Yord is hesitant and fearful of Osha's presence on board their ship, causing Sol to bring Yord's attention to his very fear and telling Yord to chill the hell out. And after Sol gets word from Vernestra that May was spotted on the planet Olega, Sol and the gang immediately head to the Jedi Temple there. And during their travels to Olega, Sol tells Osha that he blames himself for not being a good enough teacher to get Osha to let go of her grief and loss, showing just how deeply Sol cares for his former Padawan, conquering her dark side even to this day. And when the team arrive at the doors of the Olega Jedi Temple, May also returns to Master Torbin's meditation room, where Master Torbin remains as still as he was when she first arrived at the beginning of the episode, due to Torbin undertaking something called a Barash Vow. In Star Wars, a Barash Vow is a special oath that a Jedi can take that says that they will promise to spend their life trying to understand and become one with the Force itself. And because this vow requires all of their attention, a Jedi must typically leave the Order in order to meet this oath. And it's an oath usually taken by Jedi looking to atone for a past mistake of some sort, much like May tells Torbin that he's doing in order to atone for whatever he, Kalnaka, Indara, and Sol did back on Brendok 16 years before. In the trailers for the Acolyte, we actually see a Padawan Torbin having his eyes turned black on the planet Brendok while standing before Mother Anastasia and her cult, with those blackened eyes likely being some type of Force mind control or something perfected by that cult. A mind control that could be at the root of the mystery of what the Jedi could have done on Brendok. But what's particularly interesting is that right before Torbin drinks that poison, he asks May to forgive him because he genuinely thought that he and his fellow Jedi were doing the right thing. But apparently he would later discover that he was wrong. Unfortunately for Sol's group though, they would arrive a few moments too late, with Master Sol rushing to his old friend after the Force causes him to feel Master Torbin's life force leave his body. However, it is Osha that finds Torbin's dead body first, using a Force hallucination of her sister May to lead her to Torbin's room. Another possible hint towards the powers of a potential Force dyad between those two. And as Osha is looking over Torbin's body, I noticed that Torbin's eyes also follow the series' theme of duality as well, as one of his eyes were made blind by a mysterious injury, leaving Torbin with one eye that receives light and another eye that is left in darkness, reflecting the light and dark theme of the show. And when Sol and the Jedi at the temple find Osha hovering over Torbin's dead body, one of the Jedi there immediately draws their weapon at Osha in fear and fury, once again showing a Jedi fearfully drawing their weapon at an unarmed opponent. The Jedi tend to act up when there is a phantom menace afoot. Yord would do the same thing a little bit later when the group would go to confront Chimere at his Olega apothecary right after Chimere realizes that Osha tried to dupe him disguised as her sister. In fact, Yord is the only Jedi there that is scared enough at Chimere to ignite his saber, while Sol and his Padawan Jeki practice more restraint. And while being interrogated by the Jedi, Chimere plays dumb and acts like he didn't just tell Osha that May's master will be pleased at her potentially killing a Jedi without a weapon or poison. He even calls the Jedi mind trick the memory wipe thing to sell that lie even more. and to keep the Jedi off of his scent, he even agrees to work with them to set up a trap for May that night, a plan that Yord and his fearful nature are not exactly all that thrilled with, as evidenced by Yord saying the classic Star Wars line, "I've got a bad feeling about this." Saul, on the other hand, has a really bad feeling about including Osha on a mission to detain her sister May, as he knows that Osha is itching to avenge her family by directing her pent-up grief and rage at May, who she believes caused that deadly Brendok fire. And when Saul eventually confronts May, May uses the same tactics that she used with Indara and initially attacks him without a weapon before trying to yoink his lightsaber away from him to grow his fear of her, and for that fear to get him to draw his lightsaber to attempt to strike down his unarmed opponent. But Saul resists that temptation and instead plays super aggressive defense. However, when May throws one of her knives in Saul's direction, Yord immediately intervenes with the Force and then puts his hand on his lightsaber as he cautiously and fearfully approaches her. But since May is a ninja-ass Force user, she would kick up some dust to make her escape, but not before almost getting run over by a speeder being driven by a Abednedo alien. And while speeder jacking this alien, May and Osha finally reunite face to face for the first time in years, something that May cannot believe as she tells Saul just moments before this that she believed Osha to have died in the fire. May then calls Osha by her childhood name Oshi, but Osha's in a rage ain't trying to hear all that Oshi shit, and so Osha fires a few stun rounds at her sister before May narrowly escapes. The very next day, May would go to assassinate Chimere for selling her out to the Jedi, but it appears that Chimere uses some type of affinity in the Force to dodge May's ninja-like attacks, before making it up to May by telling her that Kilnaka, the Wookiee Jedi that she's been looking for, was chilling out on the planet Kofar, a planet that appears to be just as green and alive with the Force as the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk is. However, as much as Saul would love to chase May's trail, he is forced by Vernestra to return to the Jedi Council in order to deliberate their next move instead of taking action, something that Saul finds odd and a little bit unacceptable given how close they are to apprehending May. And I also find that super odd myself, which is why I truly do not trust Vernestra as someone who is 100% on the up and up in this series. But anyways, that is it for this breakdown of episodes 1 and 2 of Acolyte Season 1. What do you guys think of this series, and who do you guys think is behind that mask? Let us know in the comment section down below. But like always, thank you guys for watching this video. You guys can follow me at Mastertainment on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, wherever I am on the internet. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers here on YouTube, and make sure you hit that notification bell to get notifications every time we upload a video. But yeah, you guys are awesome. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.